Greetings from the starfish. This is the third time that I have tried to record this particular video. The first two times were recording through iMovie, so I did a little research and downloaded another program, and I've done some tests on it, and I think we'll be good. So if this particular sun-moon combination doesn't work this time, maybe I'll just leave it to like the 144th one that I do. In any case, I picked Sun in Capricorn, Moon in Leo because David Bowie's birthday was earlier this week, actually almost a week ago. And that's basically it. And I tried to do this 2 times. Both videos were about 30 minutes. So, you know what? I know it's going to work out this time. So let's get started. So you remember that when we talk about the sun, we talk about the vitality and the spirit and what drives the ego, and what drives the ego can also wound the individual. So with the sun in Capricorn, we're talking about living through building. So Capricorn is symbolized by the half goat, half fish. And the half goat, half fish represents, the goat is what likes to climb and what is sure-footed, and the fish represents what is unknown and what is rather nebulous and has no linear sense of beginning and end to it. And it is said that an evolved Capricorn would be one that can inhabit both of those qualities and be able to seamlessly transition when required. So if we look at the goat portion of Capricorn as the earthy climber that walks up on top of that mountain of life and finds its sure-footed foothold and can survey the land and all of the things and or people below it, then we can see that Capricorn does enjoy doing things in a particular order, because it feels like from early on, whatever his or her value setter was, whether that was the father, now Capricorn being ruled by Saturn, which is also symbolizes the father, and patriarchal parts of society. And if you grew up in the society I grew up in or something similar to it, there's a lot of very old school patriarchal values that the sun in Capricorn may really very well cling to. And because of that, the influence of their father tends to be where they get their idea of how life should progress. So if you think that the Capricorn is traditionally interested in external, socially established values rather than their inner ones, especially early on in life. Sometimes they assess others based on how useful or valuable they are to them. And there's a tendency for the Capricorn ego to look down on people, not necessarily in a way where that person is not as good as them, but more in the sense that if somebody is not climbing their way through life with their set of values, or if someone is unable to work their way through a problem or through a solution, or to set goals in life as easily or in the way that they do, they might sort of wonder, like, what's up with that person and how can they possibly get successful? And because Capricorns tend to be more externally focused in the value system anyways, there is of course a tendency to base their progress on an externally imposed value system. So if you or a Capricorn that you know thinks that life should progress a certain way, and they have a particular order of how things should go, generally they will get very easily waylaid when their life does not fit into these neat little progressions. So to them, every lung, the spoonerisms are high in me today. Every rung in the ladder should be touched upon in just the right order. And this is where the fish portion comes in, which is the ability um, to enjoy and appreciate the mystical, irrational, unconscious inner realm that we all have. Because when the goat does stumble, it needs a good surface and an environment for it to get back onto its feet. And the realm of the fish can help bob them back to the surface, provided that Capricorn is not going in, kicking and screaming against the current. So another potential downfall of the Capricorn that, again, is not super mature, or it might be lacking in some wisdom or life experience. They tend to want everything that is laid before them to be concrete and material and tangible before they can even entertain that it's a possibility, or that it might exist, or that it is in their future. And that's all well and good to want to get, if something is measurable and it can be measured, then yes, you should conduct some sort of experiment, or find some proof, or at least some ideas that could be corroborated by something, whether it's experiences or somebody actually carried out a hypothesis to an experiment. Not every Capricorn desires the scientific bent on things, but sometimes they do. And as we know, not everything in life can be explained, and we don't really have the tools to measure everything that's out there. And a Capricorn that can trust in the process, and does decide to become spiritual, let's say through meditation or through a philosophy over a religion, because the Capricorn personality in general tends to eschew dogma, because they see things, like I said, in a step-by-step process. And there's a great benefit to that way of thinking, because it allows an individual to have some discernment before they start jumping into a belief system, or a group, or anything that says, that promises it's going to solve your problems, or it's going to bring you some better thing in another life or in this life. So Capricorn can use that cynicism as more of a discernment practice, so they don't get bamboozled very easily. However, to deny instinct, to automatically just sort of push something away because it doesn't make sense to them, even though they've never really done a lot of research or dealt with people who have done their research, to completely push away the idea that not everything that is true, or that works to create your reality, can be touched or tasted or felt. That's really an important life lesson for a Capricorn to understand. Any of you that might know David Bowie's history knows that he was pretty close to becoming a monk, and then it was advised to him that he had greater things to do in the world, and he should go out and do those things. And there's a great theme of soul searching and inner journeying throughout his life that he'll talk about in interviews, and you can even get that sense in certain albums at different periods of his life, that some albums definitely had a more introspective feel than others. So there's a nice way, the Capricorn generally needs to guide themselves, and have a loose form around them that they can work with, because they do, again, want to have a structure, but they'd like to take the pieces and build it themselves. They're not too keen on people building their structures around them. So this is a good time to start talking a little bit about Moon in Leo. And as we've talked about in my Moon series, the Moon is the unconscious emotions, the visceral reactions, what emotionally triggers you. It can explain a lot about what makes one feel secure in themselves, what makes them feel at home, since Moon is the luminary of the home and of planting seeds, and emotional security is really the big thing here. So when we talk about the Moon in Leo, we talk about security through creating. And the idea is through the subject's creative processes, which we all have a great deal of creativity in our bodies, and a lot of people tend to deny this. They deny that if you're a creative person, you must be a writer or a painter or a musician. We don't understand that every day we are creating. We create a schedule for the day. If we cook, we create a meal. We are creating a route to take to work or to our errands. Where if we have children, we have to be really creative, because they will challenge our ability to deal with things in a black and white fashion, because children haven't been stopped and brainwashed and taught to be more logical, for whatever good that does us sometimes, right? And so the Moon in Leo is very much like a very perpetual child in a lot of ways. And this can be both good and bad. There's nothing wrong with being childlike, and as a lunar Sagittarian, I can totally attest to that with Moon in the third house. I enjoy the idea of not looking at everything like it's got to be black and white, and tuning into creativity, and lately, like, I myself have been working on not dumbing down my vocabulary or using kind of silly, overly sort of wacky analogies, a la like Tom Robbins, for instance, when I teach or when I do classes. And I just like how children just say whatever the hell they're thinking, and they express whatever they're feeling until we tell them, don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about, or oh, you shouldn't be angry. So this is where Moon in Leo can really come to a lot of grief in their younger years. So the Moon tends to develop before the Sun really gets a chance to develop in our personality. And whoever we view as the mother figure, and the mother figure does not have to be biological mom. And I'm sure that many of you out there can say, oh yeah, definitely, because not everybody had a biological mother around for one reason or another. Or the biological mother could have functioned more like a father for whatever reason, or may have been absent a lot, right? So we have to think about who in our life growing up was the example of nurturing, and who kept the home together, who created safety and security, who was doling out most of the affection. And in some cases, both parents do both the feminine, masculine energies really well. But just think about that. And when you go back into your past, there's two extremes that Moon in Leo tends to really grab onto when they're younger. And then whatever the Moon in Leo experienced is generally some sort of amalgamation of the two extremes, and some in some way heavier on some people, and the others way heavier on others. I'll get to that right now. So one extreme would be if the Moon in Leo child approaches mom or dad or mother figure and says, look at this thing I created, and or look at me, I'm going to act out the scene of that movie we just watched, or they want to help cook, or they just want to like get in there and start making things, or having interesting conversations with you, or kids are creative practically all the time, really. And and mother figure, whoever that was, may have said, oh, not now. Or maybe there was other kids to attend to and it wasn't malicious, it was just, you're like 3 out of 6 kids here. um, or maybe the mother figure was not super hands-on for some reason. uh, maybe there was mental illness going on, or any reason, whatever it is. I'd like to think that parents are well-meaning, for the very, very most part. And so how the Moon in Leo child experience that may very well put a damper on them sharing their creativity. They may feel very insecure because, like Capricorn, like solar Capricorn, lunar Moon, lunar Leo, also has this external focus when they're younger, not as wise, not as experienced, not as sure of themselves. And that is approval. I want approval for my creative endeavors. I want approval for wanting to do this, and I want to learn how to do all these cool things that you as an adult do. And so, depending on how much you may have been ignored as a child, or how many responsibilities the parent, or sometimes you just had one parent and the parent had to be everything, and it doesn't matter if you were the only child or not. It's still a lot of responsibility for one adult, right? So the converse to that would be the parent that overindulged, really overindulged in like everything the Moon in Leo child created was like Picasso, or Van Gogh, so or Hopper. So one of the problems with that is, if everything you do is just like the greatest thing since sliced bread. Oh, look, little Jimmy pooped. Oh, it's the greatest thing ever. To to basically being just doted on in terms of everything they were creating, and this tends to be more common with only children, for sure, with the Moon in Leo, but not always. Sometimes the Moon in Leo child can be so forceful that it's like you can't ignore them. I'm not so sure that would really happen with a solar Capricorn. There doesn't tend to be that forcefulness in there, but if, let's say, they had Aries rising or something, or Leo rising and Moon in the first house, yeah, they could be very much demanding of attention and have much more thespian qualities to their creativity, being a little dramatic maybe when they weren't getting their way. But the indulged Moon in Leo doesn't learn how to take criticism very well, and so as they get older, they may bristle at the least little bit of, even if it's constructive, critical words, or anything like. So it's really important that if a Moon in Leo gets a nice balance where they're supported, but they're not like overly indulged, and the parent isn't living vicariously through them, like, oh, look at how creative they are, they got my creative genes, oh, everything they do is so great, because the parent's looking at it as though my creation created something. More as, oh, that's so great, like, I can't wait to see little Susie develop in her own way. So you either get the person that bristles at criticism because it reminds them of all the criticism they got when they were a kid, and it's just one more straw breaking their confidence is back. Or it could be that they never learned how to ever get even a lick of, oh, maybe you could try that better. Oh, let me bring you to somebody who can teach you to do that. Oh, do you want to get better at that? I think it's time. Let's take you to, or let me help you. So it's really it's great that somebody gets, like the middle ground would be idea. So if you're Moon in Leo, or the person that you're watching this video for is Moon in Leo, getting a good sense of their childhood here will really tell you what was going on. And so as the Moon in Leo grows up, whatever the extreme was, or if they had the middle ground, that's great too. Just like the solar Capricorn, The lunar Leo has to learn to stop looking outside of him or herself for the approval of their spontaneous creativity. And, some people are more externally focused than others. They just are. There's some people that give zero flying fucks about what other people think about their ideas and their endeavors, and I envy them to a degree because I'm still giving my fucks out occasionally, and the less I give out, though, the better I feel. And so this combination really, now we culminate to the point where we start to talk about, well, how do these two luminaries in these two signs come together, and what can they make for us? What can they do to propel us into a happier, more fulfilling life? So just taking the sun and moon combination together doesn't do a whole lot to tell you enough nuance about someone's personality. But again, because we're talking about David Bowie, we're talking about an individual here who had this combination, but also had Aquarius rising, and that's the sign of the rebel, the rebellious one who wants to take things beyond labels. And there's a very non-dual aspect to the Aquarian energy that neither goes totally yin or totally yang. And we're also talking about somebody whose midheaven was in Sagittarius, and the midheaven is a lot of how you would like the world to see you, what you would like your reputation to be. And because it's on the cusp of the 10th house, it has a lot to do with the higher thinking, and then of course the career, the social status. And in Sagittarius, you're a truth seeker. So there was a part of David's personality that probably just really wanted to expose the truth, and the truth is basically whatever we perceive it as, and to just lay everything out and not worry so much about what other people are thinking. But early on in life, it's very possible. He once in an interview, described himself as growing up as, he said, I was just a shy Capricorn boy. And the moon in Leo is often called the closet show-off. And it's somebody who really wants to get out there and be, they want to be seen, they want to be admired, but there is so much fear of rejection in there. And so they'll often create like sort of a caricature of themselves, which he actually did really well multiple times. And there's also a bit of, we talked about the eternal child. So the moon in Leo in particular, because there's a strong, passionate, emotional, really like dramatic outpouring of emotion. And Leo is often associated, it's a sign of the child. The moon is a sign of the child, two different aspects of the child. One is more like the womb child, and one is more like the playful, pleasure-seeking child. So a lot of times these subjects, well into their 30s and 40s, may still not have figured out how to react to or respond to other people's reactions to them. In other words, because Leo is a very prideful sign, they can feel extremely wounded if somebody, just has any criticism of them as somebody that they're emotionally connected with, right? So, in particular, the partner. The partner generally gets to see, the moon sign more so than any other person that you're connected with. So it's important that the moon in Leo really learn how to take criticism and how not to base their emotional value on what other people are saying about them. And there's a catch to this, of course. One is that if one person tells you, you know what, you're like an arrogant prick. You're like, am I? If 10 people tell you that, And it's starting to really affect some things that you want to do, like things you want to accomplish or relationships you want to forge. It might be worth listening to and maybe becoming a little bit more humble and becoming less reactive. So there's two things going on here. Capricorn and Leo, these signs in particular, in these placements especially, can be really defensive. And so one thing that this subject can do is develop a practice in themselves that is able to recognize when that defensive feeling boils up inside them, and then give themselves some space. Give themselves some space between stimulus and response, which things like meditation and there's a lot of Buddhist philosophy, Taoist philosophy that addresses this quite a bit. And to give yourself, if you have to count to 10, counting to 10 really does fix a lot of things, or at least fixes a lot of things you may regret in the future. And just give yourself that ability to not get defensive and to sit there and to sit with what this person has said or what they think they said. And you can parse out their issues from your issues, and you don't have to take what they said personally. Nothing really is personal when you think about it. And the ability to look at your value. So Sun in Capricorn has to look at their path in life as exactly that, their path in life. They cannot follow in somebody else's footsteps exactly. Maybe they do by coincidence, but to constantly force yourself into a very limited space puts blinders on for all these other opportunities that could propel you wherever you want to go. Just because it's not a direct route, sometimes the best route is the circuitous one that you never planned out in the first place. And then what the moon in Leo would want to learn, of course, is that seeking approval for anything at all, for how they feel, for the things they create out of their feelings, for their desire to go forth and perform. To get approval before you get the confidence doesn't work. You have to get out there and just do it because you want to, because it makes you feel secure and safe as you're doing it. And then it should stop there. So to continue whatever you're doing and then waiting to see if you should keep doing it based on what somebody else's opinion is not working for you. So stop doing that. Do it because you enjoy it, because you love it, because it feels good. What friends and lovers and close partners of any kind with Capricorn, with Moon and Leo will experience is a great deal of loyalty for sure. And what I'm going to do now to close this off is I'm going to give you some sort of, just going to rattle off some potentially less positive aspects of this. And I'm not saying it in a black and white sense. Remember, we're still parsing out two luminaries out of the whole chart, so there's a lot more to deal with here. But then I'll go on the other side and I'll give you all the great, wonderful traits that could come of this coming together. Now you just got to remember that Capricorn and Leo are in conjunct, and they're two signs that don't particularly have a lot in common. You've got Earth, Cardinal, and you've got Leo, you've got Fire fixed. So we're dealing with sort of a lot of like missed connections here. Oh, wait, this is where we connect. We're kind of externally focused. We sort of think we're supposed to do things based on what somebody else tells us or how somebody feels about us. Ooh, let's get rid of that. So the potential pitfalls here, ego like 1,000 miles wide. And a lot of times, and we all know that, when the ego gets ginormous, a lot of it's just pretending to have it figured out. And what this combination could produce is just kind of feeling alone and confused inside, but, giving out that everything's all right. And again, unless there's something going on, I talked about earlier, Aries rising. I don't think I've met an Aries rising that has a really good poker face. Even if they have good acting ability. Or, like I said, Moon in the first house. If Leo rising and Moon happens to fall in the first house for that could definitely get somebody who's more emotive and who's less able to hide their emotions. But in general, particularly with the Capricorn Sun, there's that ability to make everybody think, oh, everything's fine, everything's fine. Meanwhile, they're trying to fit their life into someone else's timeline. They're trying to fit their emotional needs into the container they had earlier in life. So if everything that you're reacting to is just based on stuff that you experienced when you were a child, remember, you're not a child anymore. So let's try to create some new responses and some new reactions and less expectations of other people, right? So we talked about emotional immaturity might go well into adulthood here, and again, we talked about how we could potentially figure that out, being on an inner journey and an honest one where you're able to be like, oh yeah, that's not good. Oh, I'm getting really defensive there. Why are my hackles up? That's kind of one of the most important questions this combination is going to want to ask. Got to give in to the mystical parts of life. Not everything needs to be explained or planned out, and just, this combination here is prone to melodrama if things don't work out, really prone to taking things personally in the workplace and bringing it home and making life miserable for everybody around them. So please, let's not do that. And there's also a bit of emotional fragility here. And there's sometimes expecting that other people will cater to that and walk on eggshells around them. It doesn't work that way. You can't expect everybody to act in a way that pleases you. You have to be pleased with whatever's going on, no matter what, or leave. But remember, you're taking yourself with you. So hopefully, you're taking something that is more self-assured and isn't so reactive and responsive to everything going on around you. If you feel that you need constant assurance of how wonderful you are, maybe that's another sign that there's some inner work to be done. And an interesting thing that tends to happen with these people, but there's like a dichotomy here. The moon in Leo may sort of unconsciously settle themselves around people who are kind of like ass kissers, and the sycophancy may or may not bother them, but for the sun in Capricorn it will bother them. So at some point there's going to have to be like this reconciling of the two things, because sun in Capricorn can usually see through a bullshitter pretty fast, but the moon in Leo, that it's going to be hard to not want to keep that person around. So yeah, maybe checking that in. Anyways, so here's why I would want to have a sun in Capricorn with moon in Leo as my friend. They have creativity that oozes from their spontaneous expression. It can be charming and well-spoken. They can have the capacity to dive right into deep conversation. Small talk is probably not their thing. They can recognize emotional fragility in others really well once they've dealt with their own, if they indeed cultivated that. And so there's a great ability to, once they learn, that we're all humans and we're all struggling with the same things and we're all pretty much wanting the same things in life, and they're able to work through that, there's a great capacity for this person to be a really good benefactor for people who are in a bad place, maybe addicted to drugs or depressed, or just, they can be a very strong presence because they've had to work through their own leanings on other people's expectations. And once they get secure in their own desires, in their own living up to their own expectations only, they could become a really solid pillar for people, who really need to learn that themselves. And Capricorns always have a pretty darn good business sense. So if they're able to tune into the fishier intuitive part, they are great business partners. They know when to start, when to pull out, when to leave it running to somebody else. And they're always going to want to create a lot of stability for their family too. They're pretty good at learning how to toe the line between society's expectations and doing what's best for them and their loved ones. And in conclusion, if this subject is able to take an introspective, non-defensive role in their own development, they will have a very strong desire and ability to help others. Sometimes it will be through their art. I could see a Capricorn starting like a theater company, so the moon in Leo can do their direction or their, or their acting or writing plays or whatever, and being able to run that really successfully and still be able to do what they love. Something like that. that would be a really great expression of being able to find a way to take care of themselves in a material and monetary way and still be able to use their creativity and be able to be free and happy and all those good things. So this concludes the video. Hope you had fun. Hope you enjoyed it. And then I have a question for you. Maybe in the comments you can answer, what's your favorite David Bowie album? I have two that I tend to waffle through, Low and Outside. Low and Out. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. Very rarely do I ever say about another album, you know what, I think this was my favorite album. It's usually just those two. If you haven't checked one or either of those out, well, you got YouTube, so you might as well do it. If you have a Sun-Moon combination you want done next, put it in the comments. Feel free to subscribe. And also, it's 2018 right now, if you're watching this in this year, and on the 20th of this month, on January, I'm holding like an online astrology course to help you learn how to interpret birth charts. So if you have any questions about that, just email me, and that email's in the description. All right, well, I am praying to the technological gods that this video takes and uploads with no hitches. So if you're hearing this, that means it did, and yay!